Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now in today's video we are going to look at another product from the company Crua Outdoors. Now if you've been following my channel, you've seen a number of Crua products in the past. Today we are going to look at the XTENT. Now this is one of the newer tent shelter systems in their lineup. Just made it to the market after a whole bunch of research, whole bunch of development, and finally getting this put together and ready for the market. So there are two models. There's the XTENT and the XTENT Max, this one here being the standard size. And so this is going to be the perfect opportunity to get this set up. I'm out here for a week. I have basically 5 or 6 full nights. I'll be able to set this up, use it at length, test it out in different scenarios. Now I do expect that there's going to be pretty substantial weather at some point. Not that I'm glad that on my vacation I'm gonna have some rain, but at the same time, while doing a shelter review, it is always nice to see how this is gonna stand up in some weather. So we should get a pretty good look at this, but first things first, I have to get this thing set up. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you, and if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. And so before we get too far, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at Crua Outdoors who did provide this product for review. So again, this here being the Crua XTENT. Now the first thing about Crua products is, in my opinion, they're always just a little too big, a little too bulky, and a little too heavy for the, I would say, backpacking scenario. Now, I'll caveat that by saying, it depends how far you're gonna go and how far your load already is with your other gear. These are gonna be a little bit heavier than you would want to carry, and sometimes they are substantially heavier, but full featured shelters and very nicely made. So if you wanna make a trade-off on your shelter system and carry a little more weight, a little more bulk for the convenience that you get for some of the great features, you could take that into consideration. But for the most part, I would say that Crua products are a little better suited for car camping or scenarios where you're not hiking in too far. But here again, this is the XTENT, and you can see the overall dimensions here. I mean, it's roughly about 24 inches in total length here. So again, you do have a pretty substantial size. You end up with about 6 or 8 inches in diameter here, and pretty heavy. Now I will annotate all the actual sort of dimensions and sizes below, but just my general observation here, I mean, this is getting up there in terms of what you'd really want to carry. But here today, perfect. Now this is not quite car camping and it's not quite glamping, but it's that perfect spot right in between. And I usually say that I don't want to use my shelter system for the first time when I get out in the actual camping environment. But the difference here is, well, even if I had a problem with this, I have a nice place where I can go in and sleep if there was really, truly a problem. It's not like I'm out there deep in the wilderness with no other solutions. But with that said, let's get into the setup. So here you can see this is how it comes nicely packaged. A couple of straps across the top. Now it does look like they've made some minor improvements to their case overall. I have seen a number of these bags on a number of tents, and it looks like they're kind of beefing them up just a little bit, which is nice. Opening this up here, and very similar to most other Crua products that I've seen. So unpacking and setting up your new tent, well, if you so need it, there is some instructions. Now you'll notice that I don't have any sort of ground sheet. I am going to test this without a ground sheet. Most Crua products do come without them, but they also do a very nice job on the bathtub floor. And where I do expect to get a little bit of weather, it'll be a good opportunity to test this without the ground sheet to see how it performs. Holes, pegs, repair kit, fly,
And so paying attention to the orientation, you can see this is going to be the front going to the back and then the sides. This is a little bit longer than it is wide, and this sight here has a little bit of a side slope. Now I'd rather be dealing with sort of like a front to back lean than I would side to side, and I think this is going to work out for me pretty well here. So I'm going to set this up in this particular orientation, and I think it'll work out mighty nice.
Now, one thing you'll notice is not only does this come with the standard poles, but it also comes with extensions. That is the key with the XTENT. The fact of the matter is it can be both lowered down or raised up. And you'll see that these extensions do add substantial height, which is nice. So I am going to set these aside just for now. I'm going to do the low setup for the first night. And then potentially as things move along throughout this process, we'll raise it up. Now the next thing you'll notice is, as I mentioned, Crua products are a little bit heavy, but they're also very nicely made. You will notice that these poles are very oversized. So thick aluminum, nice and beefy, good and rigid. I mean, nicely made. They're just going to be a little heavier than your typical backpacking products. Most Crua products do leverage some sort of sleeves, so you'll notice at the top of the mesh you do end up with these sleeves here. So the first thing, you got to get your poles through these, and then you pin them into the corners. They already have pins already attached, so pretty straightforward. Just picking the proper cross sleeve here and simply sliding these through.
And so now you can see I have my poles crisscrossed through the sleeves, and now going to leverage the corner pins. So literally just taking the ends of the poles and inserting the pins, and then this should pop up pretty easily right into place. Now next, just leveraging these clips and attaching them to the poles, but you will notice that they do have tensioning devices pretty much in essence, because you can raise or lower the structure here. So these do need to be a little bit adjustable, which is why you can see they are mounted the way they are. So it's going to take me just a second to figure this out, but should be very straightforward, and then we'll see how that goes and take it from there. Now with very little difficulty, this went up extremely fast. Again, very easy, nothing to it. And leveraging these 12 straps, you'll see one on the top and then two going down the sides. And I basically loosened these pretty much as you possibly could with the idea being I'd rather just have a little bit of the ability to tension these now to the proper tension versus trying to struggle to get these on in the first place. But the next thing you'll see is there is extra mesh, and again, keep in mind that you can run this either popped up or what is now in the lowest position, and this here is pretty much used in essence to keep the extra material at bay and get everything nice and taut. So that's the next step. And so now as we get a look at this, what I found is after clipping each one of these all the way around, I started working on these tensioners, and bottom line is in the lowest position, you do want these fully tightened. So you can see each one of these, I have pulled it literally as tight as they can go all the way around, and this thing sits just pretty. It looks really nice, sitting absolutely perfect. Everything nice and taut and exactly how you want it. I do have to say this particular tent has some fantastic engineering that has gone into it to get all of this sort of little nuance and detail completely worked out. Absolutely perfect, to perfection, nicely done. So at this point, the base of the tent is really set up. Now, I did not stake this down, nor do I think I need to. I mean, I'm not expecting any substantial winds, and you can see this is just nice and freestanding. And by not staking it down right now, I can make minor adjustments, especially as I'm setting it up, and maybe once I get my actual sleep system in there to maintain maximum comfort. Now, you can see that there are some vents all the way around, which is nice. Crua does a great job with their vents, and even their other tents that technically don't have mesh nor a fly do a wonderful job breathing. That's one thing you will see. They do a great job. And there are all the way around, so 3 vents. Very nicely done, perfectly positioned. And then the front door for me, nice access. Now, I did take note of the fact that they do have these little Velcro tabs here. Again, perfectly positioned so that as you open the door in the lowered position, you can't accidentally run your zipper up and past that. That's a nice little feature, and it shows that Crua is paying attention to the details. Very interesting that they thought of that, but brilliant nonetheless. And this, I think, is going to be a fantastic shelter. So let's take a look at the inside before I put the fly on. And as I mentioned, Crua does a nice job with their bathtub floor. Here you can see it is seam sealed, so nice flush seam seal tape. Nicely done. I have not had too many problems with Crua tents leaking, and even without utilizing some sort of a ground sheet. I did have a minor, and I mean minor, problem just with one getting a tiny little bit of moisture on the inside, but that was a really tough situation, and overall I do have to say the tent performed extremely well. But here, seeing all the same construction that I'm used to, and maybe stepping it up a notch, where now we have the 3 vents, 1, 2, 3. You have this internal flap, which if you want to sort of close that up, you can. You end up with these nice long pockets here, so a pocket here, pocket here, pocket here. Not on this side, which is kind of funny, but anyway, nonetheless looking really good. Now you also have the ability to hang stuff from the top, which is really cool. And funny enough, and this is actually a feature, but Crua does say that now that this mesh is pulled up, you can actually stash some gear in there, which gives you a ton of storage if you really look at that. Now, personally, I probably won't go crazy with that because I don't like to really mess with my mesh too much. I like to be very careful about the mesh, but they say that you can do it. So maybe, you know, things like, I don't know, work gloves or, you know, lighter, softer items, little pouches, things like that. You could even maybe sneak a couple snacks in there. And just a couple little subtleties you'll notice in the corners here. You actually do have a couple of additional pockets. Now, again, very little pockets, but nice that they're there. And I'll probably stash something like a lantern or something in that tonight. Now, another detail, you'll notice that down low, you end up with these sort of complete panels. So a little bit of privacy, which is really nice. And then plenty of mesh up and above, in fact, completely mesh. So you do end up with some privacy, and that's even the case here for the front door. So you'll notice that here, even though the mesh does continue down across the front, the back side of it again is both going to be a little bit water repellent, but it also gives you that privacy. Now Crua does a wonderful job with their zippers. They always work extremely well and very easily, so no problems. I would never expect there to be any problems with Crua zippers, and they do a fantastic job. So generally speaking, this basic setup here, very, very nice. Now, in order for me to get the rainfly truly into place, I do have to stake this down. You'll notice that Crua leverages these real heavy-duty bungee style loops. It kind of adds a little bit of like a shock, which is nice because then you're not really flexing and tearing at your fabrics. You get a little bit of give, but you do need to stake this down. So at this point, I'm going to stake everything down and really get this all into place. And Crua providing a massive amount of stakes. I mean, massive. This is ridiculous. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26 stakes comes with this kit. If you didn't have tent pegs, you have more than enough now. And so now you can see this is fully ready to rock and roll. Here I got all my vents nicely staked out, everything here absolutely perfect. Now this is, I don't know, I guess a little bit short to stake directly to the ground, but you do also have tie outs. And one thing that Crua does nicely is they always find ways to give you the ability to tidy things up. So you'll notice these tie outs just inside that little bit of a shock cord there in all sides and corners, which is very nice, keeps things nice and tidy. So very well done. That is impressive. I do like it. And again, on the back side, you can see the vent perfectly pulled out, ready to go. And this tent at this point is ready for some good field use. So we'll get this to some good use over the next week, and I am looking forward to spending the night out here. So the XTENT does have this awning. Basically the front door can be stretched out. Now underneath there is an additional panel if you want to even lengthen this out even more. So the front door can convert into a bit of an awning, which is really cool. You will notice this is a slightly undersized vestibule area, but now with the awning kind of nicely spreading things out. Now I did find it's a little bit cumbersome. There's probably a few ways you could set this up. There's not a ton of information on Crua's website or in their instructions, but you'll see here I actually just leveraged these at an angle to kind of get them seated down where this is anchored into the ground, and made a nice secure point for me so it can't accidentally get bumped around. And then just lashing these down, leveraging the guy outs and the tent pegs. Gives you a nice area in the front. Now I do think the design could have been a little bit better. Where you see here, this, and I'm not even sure if this is how it's supposed to go, but basically I put the post here through this little bit of webbing. What I think they probably should have done is actually flip the post around, put the spike down into the sand to hold it secure, on this end, there's a nice little sort of protected plastic end cap. This easily could have had a nice pocket built into it where that plastic could have sat in that pocket and really on the underside just allowed it to seat in there perfectly, and then this would have stuck into the ground and really anchored it. I did look at some photographs which showed these pointing up, so I assume this is what they're going for. Now if you wanted to buy a little more height, you certainly could put these more vertical than at the angle, but for me this is going to be more than fine and very cool. If you had to get out of the elements and wanted a little more room, this would certainly do it. So pretty cool. I'm like that Crua is at least thinking a little bit outside of the box, and this definitely looks pretty sweet. So you can see the bathtub floor doing a nice job. Although, unfortunately, you know, this is just quite dirty, which means when I get home, I definitely need to do a nice job cleaning this up, but not a big deal. And the nice thing is, as I mentioned, no water on the inside, so even though I did not use a ground sheet, this does a wonderful job keeping the moisture out. Now I just happen to sleep with this flap like kind of down, but not zipped. I really wanted this up to get the full effect of the mesh, just to kind of let the air breathe. But my lovely neighbors left their lights plugged in all night and it was quite bright, so I just kind of dangled that down just to try to keep the light from shining in my eyes. And the only thing that happened was just a tiny little bit of moisture dripping down because I have the sort of vestibule completely open. Now if this was literally zipped shut, that would not have been a problem. So not a big deal, but just something worth noting. Now when I got in last night, I actually opened up all the vents, so you can see here, just unzipping these flaps. One there, one on the other side, and one on the end. But what I didn't realize was the one on the end, well, when you unzip it, for whatever reason, it's just open to the outside. And it was dark, I wasn't paying attention. I unzipped that. First thing this morning, I wake up and there's a chipmunk running around inside here. And I wish I filmed it, but I was kind of like just caught by surprise that there was a chipmunk in my tent. And he was spooked, so I just opened the other side and let him out. But yeah, he was curious and checking things out. It was cool, but you don't want animals in your tent. So I don't understand the purpose of why this opens up. I guess it doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but it does. So just something worth noting. And it was kind of funny to me. So yeah, I had a little visitor this morning. And now in the back corner, you will see I have identified a little bit of water here. It seems to me like this back corner is leaking in somehow. I'm not sure, but it does feel to be a tiny bit wet as I run my hands along the seam seal. It doesn't seem like it's coming from this part here, but maybe somehow where this is all coming down together. I'm not completely sure where this is coming from, but that's enough to note. And if it was raining harder, I'd be afraid that might be a little bit worse, but that's all the real water I see that actually came in the tent because of seams or anything like that. So I'll keep an eye on it. And no, I mean a tiny little bit
in this other back corner too. I mean, not as much as on the other side, but definitely a little bit in there too. So these sort of back corners, I think, do need to be a little bit paid attention to. But other than that, this has incredible, I mean, just incredible headroom when you look, and this is in the lower position, so keep in mind this also pops up another couple of feet. And when you look here, I mean, even kneeling down, no problem. I mean, nowhere near touching the top yet. I still have another 3 or 4 inches. So, I mean, a nice size, plenty wide, plenty deep. I could keep my gear in here with ease. So very nice. I mean, the pockets were very convenient, well laid out. And yeah, this seems to have done a very nice job keeping the water out. So far so good. I mean, this XTENT, I like it.
And so the other thing that I found was kind of interesting, because this water was ponding up, the birds seemed to really like landing in here first thing this morning and taking a little bird bath. So hey, I guess I had my way of connecting with nature, but all things considered, pretty cool. Now, one thing that kind of dawned on me was this long pocket here seems to be intended to hold all your extension poles. So because the XTENT does have the ability to pop up and be the taller configuration, here you'll see leveraging this pocket does allow you to keep all your extensions in there. So pretty cool. And the other thing is, well, you know, if I wanted to break down the awning, I could obviously break these down and then store those poles in here as well. But at this point, what we're going to do is really take advantage of the fact that it's not raining right now. It's actually kind of quiet, and I'm going to get this into the extended upright position. So we'll get this a little bit taller and we'll check it out. So just talking this through, first thing I did, I unstaked my corners, got all my tie outs kind of squared away so I can work here without making a complete mess. Now keep in mind that underneath here I have a few things going on that I need to address before I can raise this up. First and foremost, I have all those clips clipping the mesh in place, and also down along the poles. Everything needs to be loosened, undone, and I need to get underneath here. So that's the first thing, is just kind of getting underneath here, getting everything situated so that I can actually raise this up. Kind of doing this carefully and methodically as to not get the water inside the tent. And so now you see this has completely lost its structure. Everything's loose, ready to go, and I can raise everything up using the additional poles. So I did make a little bit of a mistake leaving all the vents staked in. To be honest, it would have been a lot easier. Just remove all the stakes altogether. Get them all out of the way. Give yourself the flexibility for this thing to move and tug without getting stuck. That's the first thing. So now at this point, that definitely helped. And I got all these extension poles nicely into place. And you'll see this thing is quite tall. I mean, I am 6'1". I'm reaching up as high as I can. So that's at least, I would say, about 7 feet, which is nice. So good headroom here, but this thing is jacked way up. So now I got to kind of tidy everything up, tighten it all up, get it back to proper structure, and stake it down. Now at this point, the lower tie outs seem pretty happy at roughly about 50%, and the mid tie outs here definitely need to be just about completely open. that top tie out was fixed in the first place. So you'll see here, pretty much fully open, and that is fairly taut. So if you don't crank down on this, and you'll see I am stressing on this just a little bit, probably want to ease up just a touch and get that nice straight shape there, so I'm not really overly stressing the fabric. And if you're not careful, you can potentially tighten this down a little more than it really wants. So just being a little careful there, trying to get a nice tension, keeping form, yet at the same time not stressing the tent. And so now you can see fully extended. Now, in my opinion, based on what it took me to get this extended, it takes about 30 minutes to do it to what I'm gonna call battle ready. So at this point, I have it fully extended and nicely staked down and ready for weather if there's wind or anything like that. So generally, went very well. Now you can start to see why you need so many stakes, because every little tie out at this point does need them. So I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, they add up super fast. And then of course, if you want, you can even tie out the corners here from the top of the tent, get a little more security. So that is the reality. I mean, at this point, fully set up, and the head height is incredible. So standing here, I'm standing up, and you can see inside the tent there's even more headroom. And so now you can see I'm standing in here, no problem at all. Literally, I mean, I still have a good 6 inches above my head. So at 6'1", this is at least, I would say, 6'6", 6'7" in total height. This is fantastic. And if you wanted to spend the day in here and not use this as a tent, this would make a nice outdoor shelter. You could bring a little table in here. You could definitely get a couple of chairs. Now, I'm starting to develop an opinion that where this is better for car camping, I would suggest maybe going with the larger version. So really, you could go with the Max, which would give you a little bit more room. And for me personally, yes, this is good for me, but getting 2 people in here would be a little bit tight if you were sleeping. So I would say the Max is probably the better way to go for this particular shelter, where you're probably not going to carry it out backpacking, and you're probably going to use it in the car camping scenario. So out here today is day 4 of the X tent being set up. So 4th day, 3 nights out here. And you'll notice that we did get some pretty substantial rains last night. Now I got the tent ready into sort of more of that hardened exterior, lowering down the vestibule, getting it nice and buttoned up and tidying everything up. So I had to remove the poles that held up the awning and get everything tidied up. But at this point you can see the X tent doing a nice job beating up the water, and as you see here, as it runs down, nicely coated and doing a nice job on the fly. Now I will be curious, we'll take a look at the inside, make sure we didn't have any problems, and I'll point out that this is the area that I was on the inside of the tent noticing a little bit of moisture, and I wonder if we're getting a little accumulation just from this corner saturating a bit, and then also the other corner, the exact same detail. So this seems to be the one spot. If I'm gonna see trouble, maybe we'll see some in there. And the wind blown rain really was a factor last night. So I think this may have potential if we're gonna see problems to show today, but that will be interesting. Now on this side, you can see just a little bit of moisture that has saturated into the fabric. We did get a full night of rain. So after, I don't know, maybe 10 hours or so of rain, that's kind of what you get. So a little bit soaking in there, but not a big deal. And from what I can tell, not too much in the way of stretch. Maybe a tiny little bit on the fabrics, but everything still seems to be fairly taut. So you could tighten things up just a little bit, but I feel like this is keeping its shape for the most part. Now just a couple of exterior features that I did not cover at this point. You'll see here, this is the vent on the top of the fly. So this vent here, simple, like most tents, just held open with a little bit of Velcro. So you can see that there. This just goes into place. So you can tidy this up if you want, button it down even more. Just pop it open, very simple. One on each side, so one on this side and one on the opposite side. And then down here, a very interesting little feature, which I wish I could catch this in the act. This is actually a pocket that captures water and actually allows you to fill up a water bottle. So pretty simple. Of course, at that point, you do want to think a little bit in terms of purification. You could have, debris, dirt, potentially even things like, bird droppings that could fall into here. So just because you're capturing water doesn't mean it's ready to drink, but it is the opportunity to actually capture water if it is actively raining and you have, some sort of a container to catch it. So pretty cool. Now, from what I've seen so far, all Crua products utilizing these toggles, very easy. You basically just roll up your door and then leverage these toggles and these loops to keep it in place. On this particular panel, one on each side. So this is that front vestibule and door, and you can see just rolling it up out of the way. That's also going to be the case for your mesh, and typically with Crua products it works very well, kind of keeps things out of the way and gives you access when you need it. Now, as I mentioned, when I got this ready for the storm, basically I took my poles, broke them down, got them out of the way, and slid them in this side sleeve. So just the same as I showed you the other day, this working very well and getting everything out of the way. Now, first impressions so far, no moisture. That's a good sign. Getting into these corners here, well, let's take a closer look. So far, dry from what I can tell. So that does seem to be dry, maybe just the tiniest bit of surface moisture, but no puddling or ponding. And on this side, again, just some real light, I would call it surface moisture. A little bit, actually there is a drop, so literally like a drop of water. And then right here, it's gonna be hard to see, but literally just a little bit of surface moisture. But other than that, the inside here is dry. The bathtub floor doing a nice job keeping it protected. You can certainly see the moisture on the outside, but that is all on the outside, keeping the dirt, the moisture, and everything out there. Feeling the seam along here, that's all dry. So this part of the tent is exposed when you have it jacked up in the higher version. So the ability for this to actually do its job and keep the rest of the interior dry, that's a big deal. And so like most two-person tents, you can see here, two actual setups in here does get quite tight. So in my opinion, a two-person tent is typically better for one person or just a really tight two. So here you can see I do have an oversized mattress and more of a standard size mattress, these both being side by side, and then all the way pushed to the back so you can see the amount of room left in the front, which is pretty much enough room just to simply get yourself out of the tent. Now, could you potentially slide everything this way, pull it towards this side, and then have some room for your gear there? Sure. Or if you flip around, depending on which way you like to sleep. Personally, for me, I do like my head end near the door. I find it's a little bit easier, and I also like the breeze on my head, so that is my preference. But again, point being, you can see it does get quite tight. And especially with the idea that you do have a little bit of an undersized vestibule, you will need a place to keep your gear, so oftentimes you will need to keep it inside with you, especially if it's going to be rainy or you're dealing with the elements. And in this particular case, you don't have a ton of room for larger packs, and especially two of them, so things are going to be just a little bit tight if you're intending on two. So I got myself another night out here in the X tent. Very nice, obviously at this point with it fully popped up, and yeah, just a good night's sleep. Very comfortable, and I do have to say the X tent has been wonderful. Generally speaking, very well constructed, working out mighty nice. So to the people at Crua, thank you again very much for the opportunity. I do appreciate you providing this product for review. And for the rest of you, just some final thoughts. Now, this was a very comprehensive video. I went through it at length, and I have used this at length at this point. It's been out here just shy of a week. It's been out here 5 nights. This is the 6th day. It's been set up out here. And even through some weather, the bathtub floor doing its job, the rain fly keeping everything dry, and overall working out extremely well. A couple little things here and there, but not a big deal. I think the X Tent is a great product in my personal opinion.
I'm not going to be bringing this backpacking. I'm probably not going to carry it in a pack. This to me is better for this car camping scenario. So with that said, I would like a little more room. My advice is I would probably go with the Max. I think just having a little bit more space here, and where you're not really so worried about bulk and weight, because it is car camping and you have the vehicle to bring this with you. Unless you have a really tight site and you're really limited for space, or you do intend on just simply using it yourself, I think having a little bit of extra room would go a long way. But either way you go, the features are still the same, so both the XTENT and XTENT Max are going to be wonderful options, and I can say I definitely recommend Crua Products. And so at this point, there's only one thing left to do, and that's break this down, clean it up, and get it packed up. So alright guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw, hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.